Welcome to Secured with Dr. KJ, the podcast where we break down cybersecurity, the technologies driving it, and the companies shaping our digital future. I'm your host, Dr. Kenneth Johnson, cybersecurity leader, technologist, and strategist. Cybersecurity isn't just an IT concern, it's a business imperative. Each episode, we'll explore key topics like cloud security, zero trust, AI-driven defense, and more. We'll assess how tech leaders are adapting, where they need to improve, and what it takes to stay ahead of evolving threats. This podcast features expert insights from security professionals, industry leaders, and technologists, offering real-world solutions to modern cybersecurity challenges. Whether you're a business leader, security expert, or just curious about how technology keeps us safe, this podcast is for you. Subscribe and join the conversation as we explore cybersecurity's biggest challenges, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time. Welcome back to another episode of Secured with Dr. KJ, where we explore people, practices, and platforms shaping today's cybersecurity landscape. Today's conversation is all about identity, the foundation of modern security. And I'm thrilled to have someone with deep expertise joining us. Corey Lee is the security CTO for education at Microsoft. With over 15 years of experience in risk analysis, identity architecture, and AI-driven security, Corey has helped education, government, and commercial organizations navigate complex identity challenges and implement zero trust strategies that work. Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, KJ.
No, appreciate it, man. Let's jump right into the first question. Identity is often called the new security perimeter, but what makes it so foundational in today's threat landscape?
Oh, man, this is one of those conversations that it's been going back and forth now for a while. What's the real perimeter? What is identity? I think people are still trying to understand what exactly identity is in 2025. But for me, I think what really makes it foundational is two words. One, glue, right? I think identity is that core fabric that connects everything together. Whether we're talking AI now, right, as you probably saw with the announcement of Agent ID, right, and just how every piece of innovation, every piece of access comes back down to some form of an identity or an entity that has an identity. That needs to access things on behalf of users or, on behalf of, scenarios from a resource access within an organization. So I think that's a key piece. And then the edge, right? So between it being the glue and the edge, I think we have a match made in heaven where all roads lead and come through identity for a large number of scenarios, both as it pertains to security from a proactive perspective, from a detective perspective, and from a response perspective. So it's hard to get away from it, man. It's hard to get away.
No, it really is. And so you spoke about Agent ID. And so I kind of have like this follow-up here. So why do so many breaches still come back to mismanaged or compromised identities, right? How is Agent ID going to be something that helps along with that? I would just want to understand your take there.
I'm going to put my forensics hat on for a second. And, if I channel my inner, having the opportunity to get involved in a large number of, we'll call it cloud incident response engagements early on, when folks were new to the cloud and, before it was Azure AD, things of that nature, is a lot of forensics engagements start and end with identity. So when we think about what was the entry point for an environment, when we think about what was the initial user account that started to see some or show some activity that was malicious or suspicious in nature, oftentimes we're looking at identity telemetry, logging data, a user ID, a tenant ID, something that might be even an application ID to try to understand, where were the actions coming from? What was triggering the activity? So, and then on the flip side, whenever we're trying to look at, what took place after initial point of entry, we're still using identity to connect dots together, right? So, can we confirm whether or not this IP address, which to an extent is a form of a network ID,
Right.
right? Is triggering said, command and control activity. When we look at exfil, oftentimes the question is going to be whether that's an agent and a piece of AI or a user. What account was that exfil coming from, right? Like, so, oftentimes we want to understand, what is the identity insight and forensic details that we need to either complete the forensics investigation or connect the dots in that forensics investigation. So once again, we're not getting away from anything identity. It doesn't stop with AI, right? When we get to agents, we have a bunch of things that are acting on behalf of users, at which point those things that are acting on behalf of users, we still need to perform the same types of forensics evaluations and investigation activities that we would if it were a user taking those actions. So
Yeah, it's a tough job. It's a tough job. And, being a security leader, it's increasingly important to understand what identity is, how we can actually manage that. Right. But I also think about, scope creep, user creep, permissions creep, all of those things. I think those all tie back into identity to a degree as well.
absolutely.
What are your thoughts on, you have someone, actually, I was telling a story to a CFO probably about 6-7 months ago, and I said, have your permissions changed from the time you started with the company to now you being the CFO? And the way he looked at me was, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Why? Why are you asking me this question? And I said, if you think about it, I said, that's how an attacker can get in, is permissions that you have that were old, that you shouldn't have as a CFO anymore. And that's how they can get in. And his mind it was just stopped. He was flabbergasted on what I was saying. And I think he ended up making a call. Hey, we need to look at my access to make sure that it's right, because he doesn't want to be the cause of that. And so you
Absolutely.
see that with phishing and so forth. And so what are some of the other things that you're seeing in the market as well?
I it I think the AI conversation is really, let's just say, shining a light on a number of the areas that, like as you called out, maybe they haven't had the strongest hygiene, you know.
Mhm.
And M365 permissions tends to be a conversation that comes up all the time in the AI conversations around, did we ever really know what our M365 permissions were? Let alone how they've changed over time. Did we know what the baseline was, and do we know what good looks like? So I think identity governance is absolutely starting to become it's always been important, but I think the level of importance surrounding identity governance is now heightened, right? Folks actually really want to go deeper into how are they handling role transitions, users moving between departments, permissions that get unlocked when they move around.
Right.
It's one thing to say this is the permissions when you started at the organization. It's another thing to say, hey, 3 years from now, you took on 3 more roles, and now you have inherited permissions from every role that you've ever had. And now that's your permissions model, right,
Right.
for that environment, but it may not match the actual context associated with what you should have access to. So, I don't think least privilege is a new thing. I know it's not a new thing. I think it's not something that just came about yesterday. But I think the reality of how the change that's required on that front that
Mhm.
pertains to identity governance, I think has now become a different conversation.
No,
That
I agree. I agree with you. And so when you look at identity and access management, it's truly been evolving, just as you've been mentioning here. And so in your view, what other innovations are shaping the future of secure authentication and authorization today?
I I I love identity, to be honest, and I think everything from seeing the changes around basic foundations, like whether or not passwords are actually really required. Like, we've known guidance has been out for quite some time, highlighting that passwords create very bad behavior.
Right.
And customers are on passwordless journeys. So innovation around things like passkeys and verifiable credentials or verified ID, I think are super exciting because it's raising the bar and in the identity landscape from both a strength of authenticator and a strength of authorization construct that maybe we haven't always rolled into our architectures from an enterprise perspective. But I'm also excited that identity is in the conversation, right? It, it's one of those things that when it works, it works. It's great.
Right.
It's supposed to be a background thing, but seeing the change in things like people talking about identity threat detection and response, right? Um, 3 years from now, you didn't have a lot of, or 3 years previously, you didn't have a lot of people saying identity threat detection and response is the new sexy thing. Now it's sexy, right? And what does that mean? We're just getting closer to disrupting identity-based attacks earlier stage than what we previously might have been doing to make sure that automation, intelligence, and machine learning can be used to help do that. So I'm just excited that identity is in a conversation. I'm also excited for the what's to come around verified ID and passkeys. I think those two things alone, outside of multi-tenant stuff, right, are very core to the innovation that I think we're going to unlock here over the next 3 to 5 years. So.
Oh, and that brings up a good point. Like, we're doing a lot of great innovations at Microsoft, right? But you look at the landscape of what it is, it's not just Microsoft handling business. It's everybody in the ecosystem, right? And so we have our competitors that are handling their business from a secure perspective. And so how do you see us merging? And I'm not saying merging in like M&A activities, but I'm saying in how we help our customers, right? Because this is not just a one company thing. Yes, we have great products and we do great things, but so do they. And
Absolutely.
So how do we work together to drive the excellence customers expect?
It's a tough challenge, man. I mean, when you think about most enterprises and when you really dive down into the identity personas that exist, most organizations are going to have, FTEs, frontline workers, part-time staff and contractors, external users who are of lots of different types, affiliates and non-affiliates. I mean, it's an entire ecosystem and a spider web of interactions that come from lots of different constituents. But I think what I'm excited about is our ability to look at the bigger picture for the identity landscape at whole, helping customers understand kind of what that end-to-end identity journey may look like from the point they enter an environment to the point where they're getting access and be able to continuously monitor that while also provide some continuous governance. I think this gets us closer to the point where there aren't gaps, right? I think today there are a lot of gaps in environments where we may not know who all the contractors are. We may not really know who our guest users are, who are external users. We may not track our consumer identities real well, but we know we're doing social logins and consumer interactions. So I think just our commitment to making sure that our platform can service the needs of identities of all types of personas, and even get to multi-persona identities where users who wear multiple hats and have to perform functions under different contexts, I think allows us to really ensure that we're establishing the foundation of the future that's not just AI ready, but it's also comprehensive.
No, I love that. I love that. And security, number one on my book and on my docket there for identity. So when we look at MFA, it's really one of the most simplest and most effective controls that we have. However, there are adoption gaps, right, that still exist. I don't know why they do, but they do. So what can organizations do to strengthen their MFA strategy and really move towards a more resilient identity protection?
For me, I tend to take a little bit of a different stance on this. I know we absolutely want all users to have MFA at all times. But for me, I think for an organization that's struggling with getting the MFA coverage, the least thing that we can do is ensure that we are instantiating or enforcing MFA when we know there's some form of high risk, right? When we know that there is, so whether we call it step-up authentication or adaptive authentication, what have you, but being able to leverage identity protection like capabilities to look for risk in your authentication sessions, and then bar none, trigger just-in-time MFA to help protect accounts when required, to me becomes the minimum bar moving forward, right? Areas where we cannot effectively trigger MFA all the time or for every user, we have to be able to have disruption in place in order to contain and safeguard accounts when the time is needed, right? So, for me, that's the low bar. We got to get to adaptive MFA and the spaces where we can enforce it when it's required. But beyond that, we have to absolutely continue going on that zero trust journey, right? So, if we can't, if we don't know what our MFA gap or coverage looks like today, we got to report on that. We got to understand where we're reporting. And then from there, we need to heighten the logging and the monitoring in any area where we're not doing MFA that could be a high risk account, service principal, service account, something that's, acting on behalf of users, that we heighten the monitoring profile so that we can have eyes on those critical accounts that maybe aren't protected at the level in which they should be.
No, I love that. And so when you think about passwordless, we're all moving to a passwordless world. How do we then incorporate that MFA strategy, right? I know you look at it from the opposite side of implementing it, right? But if we're doing it right and we have passwordless that we're moving to, passkeys, all of the good things that are coming out, how do we manage that?
It's not easy. I mean, identity has never been easy, to be really clear, right? It's almost like talking about data security. Like, you're like, oh yeah, secure all your data. And it's like, it sounds good until you really get in the weeds of how to get this stuff designed and organized in a way that executes against the objectives of an organization and unlocks the business value, but also keeps the environment tight and guarded. How to manage it? It all starts with a strategy and a roadmap. I don't think this is something you can back into, right? So ultimately, we talk a lot about the passwordless journey and the zero trust roadmap. We have some guidance in those documents. So for anyone who's not familiar with the zero trust assessment, it kind of spits out a really nice, here's your, good, better, best, right? And how to make sure that you're, executing at least against a vision where the goal is, how do I reduce my attack surface, right? While also improving the security posture in a methodical way, right? We're not going to be perfect, but case in point, if we're rolling out passwordless to support our sensitive accounts, right? Our highly privileged administrative accounts, we're taking something off the table, right? We're taking known threat types and attack types off the table, where maybe we're not even concerned about things like password spray, as an example, for those critical accounts. But we know we're concerned in other areas, but we've mitigated that risk by just taking a methodical approach to how we would execute against our passwordless journey, right? The second big thing, in my opinion, just in terms of managing it, is it sounds weird, but like we see a lot of organizations that are actually using, DevOps and trackers to help keep them honest on their risk registers that are tied to their passwordless journey or their identity journey, right? So we don't forget kind of why we're on this journey, even though there might be some friction, even though there are some areas where there might be some end user adoption changes, getting in front of not just the risk that we're trying to mitigate, but the concerns that are going to take place as it pertains to the user adoption side of the house, right? Now we can make sure that we're lowering the bar of entry. We're improving the user experience, and we're tightening the security posture, all as part of one orchestrated set of activities. And it's easier said than done. I will definitely say that. But I think, with being able to take some of those approaches around the tracking and the strategy piece, I think we've seen a lot of organizations make tremendous progress in a short period of time, even if they didn't think that it was possible.
Progress is the name of the game. So
Absolutely.
it is definitely the name of the game. And so I would love Corey, your final thoughts for the audience.
So my final thoughts are, identity is here to stay, right? And when it comes to modern security operations, when it comes to grade A level user experiences in a cloud and AI enabled world, right? It's very important that we take the steps to modernize and improve our identity infrastructure and our identity security posture where it makes sense as early as possible, so that it can unblock and unlock the innovation and the adoption curve that we see, not just as we once again continue to see folks adopt AI or move towards agents, but also as we continue to move towards the quantum ready era. This is where, you're going to quickly start to see our roads also still come back to identity. So with that, the hope and the intent is that we continue to increase the value of our good, let's just say, employees who are fighting a good fight in the identity space, that we give them the resources that they need, and we prioritize those projects that are really going to unlock, once again, the future for our organizations and our customers and the entire ecosystem that's connected and hopefully will continue to stay connected. So those are just a few of my parting words, and hopefully you never have to see someone like me, whether it's, helping respond to an incident or helping on the front end strategic side. But I think we're in for an awesome future here with identity at the core.
What a powerful discussion on identity, access, and the evolving future of cybersecurity. Corey, thank you for joining the show and sharing your deep insights into why identity remains the glue and sometimes the edge of everything we protect in the digital world. From understanding agent-based threats to navigating passwordless journeys and governance, your perspective helps leaders realize that identity isn't just foundational, it's transformational. To our listeners, if you're leading cybersecurity efforts in your organization, take Corey's advice to heart. Build your strategy, embrace modern identity, and unlock a more secure future. Until next time, this is Secured with Dr. KJ, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time.